steamboats or modern machineries, whatever, not some of the Israelites. Okay. But before we talk about the distance and how difficult to travel and so on, the Exodus, where did it happen from? Did it happen from just a village or a little city or a small town, or it happened from the capital of Egypt? What do you think?
From the upper capital of Egypt.
From the capital of Egypt. Okay. So the capital of Egypt in the north or in the south?
The north.
Because if it's in the south, so we're talking about Thebes. Been to Luxor?
Yeah, that's true, yes.
Okay, if you go from Luxor east,
You'll find mountains.
but you go through the desert, you will reach the Red Sea coast by a place called Hurghada or Safaga. Okay? 3 hours on the coach today. This is number one. And then you will cross the Red Sea. So if you're leaving Thebes or Luxor, if it was the capital, you will go this direction, wrong direction, going to Saudi Arabia, crossing the Red Sea, crossing the Eastern Desert, which is not an easy, it's not like the Western Desert. Western Desert is flat, plains. But the Eastern Desert, it's rugged mountains. Very, very difficult, very harsh. So we strongly believe that the Exodus happened from the north. When and where was the capital in the north? Either by the time of the Hyksos, which is called Avaris, now Tanis and Sal Hagar, son of Hagar, or the time of the Ramesses and his family, the Ramessid period. The Ramessid period now, according to the chronology of Egypt, is too late for the Exodus. It's not our issue now to talk about this, but definitely the Exodus happened before, long before Ramesses II. Okay, so that happened mostly by the time when the Hyksos were in power. Okay, fine. But the Hyksos were a giant when it comes to military power. They were a military giant. They were a massive army. They were like a horrible military machine at the time. At the same time, or just soon after, something will happen in Egypt. Maybe the Egyptians themselves couldn't believe it at the time. When we read history, we look at it, amazing. What happened in Egypt to allow the upper Egyptians, the native Egyptians, to defeat that military giant, the Hyksos, to sweep them out, to destroy them completely, to free their country. Not just this, to go after them into Horus, the elder military route, and to reach Palestine, and to mention clearly that the Egyptian army went after the enemies of God, went after the Hyksos to make sure that none of them will survive. Where from? Egyptians from Luxor will gain that massive, sudden power to sweep the Hyksos that way. How come? Yesterday or the day before yesterday, they were paying them to be safe. And all of a sudden, they woke up this morning, destroying the Hyksos, sweeping them, finishing them, ending them completely. What happened?
Was their empire too big? Too spread out?
The Hyksos?
Yeah.
No, the Hyksos didn't have an empire. The Hyksos just ruled the northern part of Egypt. That's it. It was not like the Roman Empire or nothing. They didn't have even any access to the eastern part, like what's called now Palestine or Israel. Okay? Like, I believe that the Pharaoh or the king who was upon the throne at the time of Moses was from the Hyksos, and his army was divided into two main divisions. Maybe you'll understand this. The main division is based in the capital or around to control it and protect it. And the second division is on the borders between the northern part and the southern part. Maybe until very recently in history, if any country, any army, fighting another army, if the king or the leader is dead, the army loses the war. King is dead, army is gone. The leader is gone.
The heart of the army.
Yeah, of
The
course.
heart of the army.
Maybe today is not, I mean, like if let's say the Americans are fighting in Afghanistan, if George Bush is dead or Obama is dead, okay, they carry on. Nothing will. But if, let's say, 500 years ago, no, British king or English king is fighting the Scottish or the Irish, whatever, and he's dead, they lost completely. Alright? Okay. So half of the army, that main division, went after the Israelites and drowned in the sea. What sea? Here was no Suez Canal. But in Sinai there is something called the Red Sea. It's like small lakes, marshes. That's even more logic when you say that the Israelites crossed this. It makes sense. It's a small body of water, it's not a sea. Now some of the people explaining geology, they said that around the same time happened an earthquake in the Mediterranean, southern Spain, to the south of Spain, and that caused a tidal wave, tsunami, around the same time. We are not here to explain miracles of God, but we're just trying to mix and match things together. So if tsunami could sweep this water for half an hour, whatever, enough time decided by God for the Israelites to cross and then back again. Sweeping the Pharaoh or the army of the Hyksos. Okay? When the king is dead and half of his army, the main part of his army, drowned in the sea, only then the Egyptians felt that they are now able to start their attack. It was a huge resistance by the Hyksos, because when you go to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, you find that the grandfather of the king called Ahmes was wounded 17 times before he died. His mummy is among the mummies in the mummy's room in the Egyptian Museum. Okay? So this is, I think we've seen this. Okay. And of course, when the Israelites crossed to Sinai, there are two places now, the Egyptologists doubt where the Israelites actually settled down in Sinai. One of them is very well known as a place called Ayun Musa, but I definitely disagree with this place. Does not match. And the other one is in central Sinai, where we have a monastery called the monastery of Saba Banat, the seven nuns. This is a very fertile place, and it's strongly believed that the Israelites settled down there. Of course, we know the story later on carried on, and Moses went up the Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments from God, and Moses died before reaching the Promised Land. The Israelites never made it. I just wanted to shed lights on this story. Of course, there are many more would come to talk about this precisely, and I should have an article in the magazine this month, but it was amended to be after the summer holidays. I think it will be in September issue about the Israelites and their coming into Egypt and the Exodus. So if you'd like to carry on knowing more about it, of course you're most welcome. You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Sorry, too late. Yes. We started at 11 o'clock. But of course, if you have any question, we're talking about the Israelites and they're coming into Egypt, and the Exodus, how they left, and relating it to a certain period of time which is known in the Egyptian history as the time of the Hyksos, the followers, or the shepherd kings. So my study is actually saying that they were the same origin, they were the same kind of people. The Israelites ruled under the name Hyksos for a short period of time. Because also when we talk about how long the Israelites spent in Egypt, in some of the holy books of the Jews, it said that 4 centuries. It's like 400 years. But in some other books, they might be more precise and they said 4 generations. Generation to us today maybe is between 25 and 30 years, but to them at the time could be a bit more. So that would make about 40 years, generations about 40 years, or maybe even 50. So this is the number I told you at the beginning of the lectures, between 150 and 200 years the Israelites spent in Egypt, which is more or less the same, around the same time the Hyksos were in Egypt. So the same origin, same period of time, same habits, same stories matching all together between the Hyksos and the Israelites. This is the main thing. And some of the Egyptologists actually wrote about these books. We don't really agree on many things together, but they are trying to prove that the history we've been studying for many years, written by the early historians or by early professors, it should be now modified. Like for example, when you study the history of dynasties in Egypt, we call it the first dynasty, second dynasty, and so on. Now we have dynasty 0 and dynasty 00. So now we are changing the chronology of Egypt.
Modern classification?
Yeah, yeah. So what we think has happened, let's say 1500 BC, no, it has happened 1700 BC. A professor called David Lorol, he wrote a very good book about topics similar to this one. If you are going to read more about it. I do not agree on what he said, and even had lots of argument and debate about this. He said that we are changing the chronology of Egypt to be 340 years earlier than what we think. Everything happened, let's say 1500 BC. We think it happened 1500, or we started 1000. No, it happened 1840 BC. You got it? So it's like 340 years missing. Right? It's a good study. His book is a very good book. I don't agree on all what he said, but it's actually opening the door to study more that period of history. The problem with this period of history that we don't have many documents or evidence or proofs about what happened. Why? Because it was a dark period. As I said before, it was like black hole of the Egyptian history. Okay, everything was, especially that they didn't care about leaving things to us. This is number one. Number two, even if they have left something, it was destroyed by the Egyptians after that period of time. But also, when I said that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was definitely not Ramesses II, and I explained this how, chronologically and time-wise, we have also to look at what happened during the 18th dynasty. The 18th dynasty, which was established by Ames, the one who defeated the Hyksos and established his kingdom, what we call the New Kingdom or the Egyptian Empire. The Egyptians will learn now to go and invade other countries. They learned the lesson from going after the Hyksos. Yeah? So they got the courage now, and they want to build a great empire. Fine, okay. That family, very famous, golden era of the Egyptian history, including Tutmosis, 1, 2, 3, 4, including Hatshepsut, including Tutankhamun, including Akhenaten, great pharaohs ruled during the 18th dynasty. Right. Lots of things happened during the time of the 18th dynasty will make us think why the Egyptians or the ancient Egyptians thought that way. When we say like Someone like Queen Hatshepsut, she left us carving a text on one of her temples saying that, I'm trying to give you the translation, the meaning of it. I went after the enemies of God, and I was about to destroy them all, but the interference of the god of water, Nun, stopped me. Hello? The god of water, Nun, stopped the queen from catching and destroying the enemies of God. Where did we hear this story?
In the Bible.
It's the Exodus. Is it not the Exodus? Now, where from she got the story? She was not the Pharaoh of the Exodus, definitely. But as I said before at the beginning of the lecture, we read the text, we read the writings, and we have to be very careful because sometimes they were stealing stories, copying the stories, or exaggerating. Something happened to a Pharaoh, let's say 200, 300, 500 years ago, they are claiming that it happened to them.
In their time.
In their time. Okay? So, this is one thing. What else? Akhenaten. Same family. Akhenaten, the father of Tutankhamun. All of a sudden, a Pharaoh, who's the representative of God, he is God himself, he will say, no, we shouldn't believe in all these many gods. 2,000 gods? No. There is only one God. There is only one God. For the first time, the Egyptians will experience monotheism. First time. The first time. One God. That's it? No. We usually look at gods and we find the statues or the carvings or whatever on the walls. No, we cannot have a depiction of the gods. We cannot have a figure of the god. Why? Akhenaten. Because the god is invisible. We cannot see him. If you want to challenge God and you want to see God, so God is the hidden power behind the solar disk. For a change, he's not the solar disk, he's not the sun god. He is the hidden power behind the solar disk. So if you can look through the solar disk, you can see God. You won't. You can't. But if you look at everything and everyone, you will feel the power of God. If you look at yourself, if you look at the tree, if you look at the bird, if you look at the sea, if you look at anything, you will always feel the power of God. Okay, the idea is not new, was not created or was implemented by Akhenaten, because Ammon means the hidden one. The god Ammon means the hidden one. So the ancient Egyptians originally knew that the god is hidden, but to make it easy to understand, when you talk to children, you want to tell them a story or something like this. You want to give them examples. When you are teaching, like in schools here in Egypt, in foundation schools or nursery, whatever, they want to teach them what is the rabbit. So they have a picture, and this is a rabbit. What is a car? Picture, and this is a car. So for the Egyptians, the beginning of the Egyptian civilization was very difficult to explain the idea of God. Ammon is invisible, is hidden one. So if he's hidden one, how can I tell people about him? Okay, so we make a figure of him. Whatever, a figure of an animal, a figure of a human, a figure, you know what I mean? Very primitive way of introducing religion. Akhenaten now is more mature and more advanced. The human civilization now is advanced. So they are now ready to accept the idea of having a hidden God, an invisible God. But where from you got this idea, Mr. Akhenaten? Has it happened before your time? Oh yes. If you're talking about a period of time that Moses and the Exodus happened at the time of the Hyksos, I believe that the king of the Moses Pharaohs was the last king ruled from the Hyksos family, the 17th dynasty. And that was the end of the Hyksos period and the Hyksos rule. And the building of the Egyptian empire. Okay? So Moses and the Israelites spent like 4 generations here in Egypt, 150 to 200 years. Fine. Definitely they left their influence on the Egyptians. That's it? No, the Egyptians left their influence on the Jews. Of course. When Moses went up the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, he went down, he found them worshipping the golden calf. So of course, you live here in Egypt. Don't tell me that after 4 years, when you go back home, you won't be influenced by the Egyptians in a way or another. Definitely. Must be. The Egyptians who live in the States for 5 years or 10 years, whatever, definitely you will be influenced by the American style of living. They are not becoming Americans, but definitely they will be influenced by the society they lived in. So don't tell me that the Israelites lived like 200 years in Egypt and they're not influenced. Some of them were born and died in Egypt. Yeah? Like someone say, what do you think about Cleopatra? Was she Greek or Egyptian? What do you think? Cleopatra was definitely Egyptian. Of course, her family, her great grandfather was in Egypt 300 years ago. She was born in Egypt, lived in Egypt, died in Egypt, studied in Egypt, worshipped the Egyptian god, spoke in Egyptian language, died in Egypt, and buried in Egypt. Excuse me? What else do you want? Yeah? She had Greek origin. Oh, okay, thank you very much. That stopped her from being Egyptian, so nobody's called Americans. Of course, it's the same idea. Yeah, am I right or wrong?
Yeah, of course.
Or we can call Queen